today, so it'll always be up to date, and you can always just pull down from the repo if you get stuck, rather than downloading these zip files over and over again. So we'll get rid of this, and we'll do that. Okay, so here is my project from yesterday. Let me just open this up. And just to make sure everything is still good to go, I'm just going to run a quick turbo dev server, make sure everything works.
Quick question, is the password from yesterday should be working here as well?
Yes, same Wi-Fi.
Can I get the password again?
Sure.
Is mine somebody's not picking up?
Yeah, it's fine. Let me just get the dev server.
The WeWork password, right?
Yeah, WeWork.
P @ sign.
Yeah, this is it right here. Okay, so. All right, so just go ahead and run your dev server. Make sure everything just basically still works from yesterday. And I'll do that real quick. So localhost. Okay, so here's what I have from yesterday. Everything is good to go. What we wanted to do was get the reducer create a reducer for the map so that this result container can also know the current location, and then create thereby providing a center for the new item that we want to post. That was sort of where we left off yesterday. I didn't do that yet, so I'm going to do that right now, and then we'll keep moving forward. Okay, so you all set with the Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Okay, so most of us figured out by now that we're going to need a new reducer. So for the search container, right? So let's go ahead to the reducers. Yeah, this layout's much better than yesterday's, right? It's easier to see.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah, the remotes are over here, so if you want to tinker with it, be my guest. I don't want to fiddle around with this stuff. So one of those controls the TV, so if you want to try that. Okay, so I'm going to create a new reducer called, we'll call it map reducer. Okay. I'm going to register the reducer in the index just so I don't forget. I'm going to start hosting like viewing parties in here for like NBA games and stuff. This is a great room. Probably shouldn't say that in a YouTube video. Okay, and then inside the map reducer, let's set up a basic reducer. So we have to always start with the initial state. Right, and what key piece of information are we setting this up for? What are we trying to track in this reducer?
Lat long.
The center, right, or location Latin long, same thing. The current location, let's call it that as an easy like way to remember. So current location, which is going to be a Latin long, right? So let's initialize it as lat 0 long 0. Okay, and then actually I'm going to put this all in one line. And then the rest is just a standard reducer, right? And that's a function, which takes a state argument, which is initial state to begin with, and then an action argument, don't forget that. And then the reducer's actions, or not actions, but like functions, methods, are defined by the actions type, right? So we set up a switch statement. Set up a default, and then we return the updated state, which has to be a copy of the initial state. So updated, or new state, whatever you want to call it. Make sure you make this a copy. State. And then return updated. So this is a reducer that does nothing right now, but it's a fully qualified reducer. Like it's set up properly. Okay? Now don't forget to register the reducer in the store. Very easy to forget. So let's do that right now. So before I move ahead, everyone got that? Okay, sure.
So that switch only has one thing to do, right?
The default right now, right? So it's kind of like a method stub. just
Yeah.
does nothing. Let's head over to the store and register this new reducer right now. So it's map reducer. And we're going to call that map over here. And that's it. So now we have a new reducer registered into our project. We can insert data and have that data shared throughout the application, and we're good to go. Okay.
Sorry, back to the stores real quick. I just want to see.
Yep.
What did you
Don't
call
forget
it?
this right here. Lines 3 and lines 13 are where the changes were made.
And what is stores keeping track of again? The reducers.
So remember when I said the single store is a little bit misleading. It's really a combination of reducers. That's like the main thing happening here. So the most important lines here are lines 10 through 14, where you throw all the reducers together. And the rest is sort of boilerplate. You can even just reuse this if you want. Like you can just take this code and reuse it in all your projects.
Okay.
Every store in a Redux environment is some variation of this.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Okay,
That
are we
makes
good?
sense. All right. Yeah.
Where were we? Okay, so we have our map reducer set up. So now inside the actual search component, search container, this guy is already connected, right? It's already a connected component. It's already a container. So that part is done. So all we got to do now is register the map. So map state map. And that's it. So now this guy has a reference to the map reducer. You guys with me?
I was trying to replace that last night and just put map state map without item in there. So that's why.
Oh, you don't want to lose anything here. We're just adding more reducers,
I got
right?
it.
Right. So then here, the center should no longer be hard coded inside the component itself. Who can tell me what should go in here now?
The state value.
This props.
This dot props dot map. Good. And then what?
Flat long.
What do we call it in the reducer?
Current
LT.
location.
Current location. Exactly.
Oh, it's one object.
Correct. Right. So now I can go back here and run the Webpack. Make sure nothing crashes.
Oh, so center will accept an object? With
Uh,
the flat long in it? Or
yes.
do you have to
That's
separate
fundamentally what's happening here anyways. Yeah, this whole thing right here
it? Yeah.
is just one JSON object.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it's really the same.
Got it. You
so
don't have to
then-
split them out.
Correct. So then the Webpack was successfully run. So if I run the dev server, it'll go. Now before I load localhost, who can tell me where the map is going to be situated? Globally speaking, like in the world. The way it's currently set up. 0, 0. Do you, by off chance, you know where that is?
North Pole?
Hmm?
North Pole.
It's right off the west coast of Africa. The 0 latitude, 0 longitude. Right. So when I load the map, I should see just a big blue screen, right? And there it is. You see that?
Yes.
And if I zoom out, it'll put me right at 0, 0. See? 0, 0. So that's a good sign. That means it worked. Good?
Okay, just got a Webpack.
Obviously, we don't really want 0, 0. We want the current location that we started with yesterday. So let's grab these lat long coordinates and throw these in as the initial state values. And that should put us back in New York City. But this time it's referencing the reducer, not its own internal state.
So mine says, I'm on where it says center equals this dot props dot map. I just wanted to make sure I got that right.
Yep.
This props.map. It says this is a reserved word. Oh, okay, yeah, you took out the JSON object, so there's only one. Okay, I see.
Correct.
There's only supposed to be one squiggly. All right.
Yep.
Got it. Yep, that's what the builds now.
And then once I reload, hopefully I'm back in New York City, which I am with our current items loaded onto the map. But now it's loading through the reducer, which means we can connect it to any other container, right? That's why we did all this, right? So who can tell me what the next natural move is? What should I do next?
Fetch that to update.
I'm sorry?
You want to fetch that information so that when
So
you
what was
add
the
an item,
what was the objective of this maneuver?
It's
to store the information so that it could be used in a different context.
Exactly. What is the other container we want to put the data in?
Results.
Results. I mean, there's only one other container, right? So we go to the results container. What should we do in here to incorporate the new changes?
wait, what was the question?
So going back to the original question, what was the whole purpose of these
So-
modifications? Is to get the map location into another container, right?
Yeah, so we need to in the search.js,
Mhm.
we need to inside the location change function that we made.
Location changed.
Yeah.
Right here, center change. Okay. What do you want to do with this?
We want to make a dispatch to props function
Mm-hmm.
that returns a function that will get passed to the map reducer.
To the reducer, right? Where are those functions located?
Those functions are located in the dispatch to props.
What file specifically?
Wait, what was it?
What file specifically? So the function that you want to pass off to the reducer, which is correct, by the way.
Yeah.
Where do we have to write that function? Literally, which file?
Oh,
Search.js.
If you have to, go back to that diagram I used yesterday. 'Cause it all relates to the actions file, correct. It all relates to the diagram. So remember, anything you dispatch to the reducer happens through what? Happens via an action. So the function you're referring to, which is correct,
Yeah.
has to be written inside of the actions file. Make sense? So let's go ahead and do that. So we open up our actions file, and what do we need to do here?
make a location change function that passes the location as the parameter.
Correct. Excellent. So what do you want to call it?
I just named it location change
Location
as well.
changed. Okay. These are called action creators, by the way. So the function we're making right now is called an action creator. It's just terminology. It's an action.
Action creator.
Okay. So then here we have to return a JSON object with what characteristics? And what do you want to put in here?
So I made my type all caps location underscore changed.
Okay. And then what?
And then data was this location. And I passed in location as the parameter.
Good. Excellent. So now we have an action creator that reflects that the location of the map has changed, which we then have to do what with it? Where do we go with this next?
Then we have to go to the map producer
Okay.
and make a case in the switch statement with that all uppercase location underscore changed. And we'll ultimately be returning updated after we do some stuff on it.
Correct. Now, before we do anything, let's just do a console log, right? We always have to confirm that the reducer is even receiving the dispatch, right? So
Right.
let's start with that, and then once we confirm that, we can do more stuff. So. Okay, so that's set up for now. Let me just make sure I didn't misspell anything. Okay, so now how do we do it? How do we actually dispatch this guy?
So you, in the dispatch to props function that we need to add to search.js.
Which container? Oh, search.js. You just told me.
Search.js.
Okay, dispatch to props, which we didn't even write yet, right? So
Yeah.
we have to write one. So const dispatch to props. All right. So what should go in here?
The location changed. Just name it location changed.
Mhm.
And then that will be a function with the parameter of location.
Yep.
And
Which is
that's
right there.
going to call dispatch.
Good.
And then that's going to have a parameter in there, which is actions.location changed with location as the parameter.
Good. So let's make sure we have the actions file imported, which we do not. So this will crash. So what do we need to do?
We need to import that from 2 levels higher.
We can just copy it from the result. It's fine. Okay. So now we have the dispatch to props connected.
And then we have to put it in the export default.
Exactly.
State to
So
props.
line 60, you got to add that as an extra parameter in here. Now we have it connected. So we have the functions properly hooked up. Hopefully, like it's possible we made a mistake, but at least theoretically it's connected. So now how do we use it?
You call it and they changed that.
Right here. So what should I do next?
And results on the button click.
So what should I do here?
This props location change.
This dot props dot location change, and then what do I pass in?
Center.
Center. All right. Check in on Webpack. Webpack is so far so good. Keep the dev server running. Okay, go back to the map, reload it, and then if I open the console, and I move the map around, now I've got 2 console logs, right? The one that matters is the second one, the map reducer. Right, so what is that confirming for us?
Redux is booked.
The action sequence is confirmed, right? So now the data has been successfully passed to the reducer. And we're actually even seeing the Latin long, which is the exact same coordinates as the one from the container. Make sense? So it was successfully transferred. So now that we've confirmed that, going back to the map reducer, what do? Remember, this is just a console log, right? We didn't actually do any logic. So what should we do now?
We need to update that the updated object that we created.
What should we do with this?
We need to pass in action.data.lng, like just call those functions and then pass it in at the lat and the long and then return that.
Yeah, we got to reassign the current location. Okay, so the current location key has to be reassigned. But remember that the data key is the entire Latin long, so you can just do it like that. Same difference.
Guys, see search.js real quick on the center change. I missed that.
Right
Oh,
here.
right in that function. Okay.
So that's another good example of the React Redux flow. That was a pretty good sequence. You want to get used to that whole cycle, what we just did, setting up the reducer, getting some initial state, creating an action to mutate the state, connecting to another container, etc. Like that's kind of the flow you want to get used to. Who has it working? Raise your hand. Okay, so we're waiting on a couple, so let me just pause the video.
Yeah, I got stuck on a bug, like kind of in the middle.
That's fine. I just want to make sure I don't move too far ahead. That's all. So let me just pause the video.
I'm not even sure.
All right, so we hooked up the sequence where locations changed. Now we have that properly going through the reducer now, which is good, and updating the reducer accordingly. So great. So let's not lose sight of the objective, though. What was the ultimate objective?
To be able to add an item and then it centers on the item.
Correct. Wherever the map is currently located. So we still haven't done that. So where do we need to go next?
So then we have to go to results.js, where we're in the add item. Wait, hold on. Actually, we have it hard coded in this .state right now. So
Currently, right. We definitely don't want that.
We don't want
Right.
that.
So we should just comment that out. We'll just remove that for now.
So then you could go like new item,
Down here. Right. Okay.
and call it, I guess, position, and do this dot props dot map dot current location.
Sorry if this is a stupid question. If since we had that value up there that we just commented out, we couldn't leave that as a default value and then change it in this function.
Oh, we could do that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
There's no need for that default value anymore.
Okay.
It just doesn't serve a purpose anymore.
But if there was a situation where we needed a default value in there, we could leave that there and still reset it here.
We could, but I wouldn't recommend that either. I would always defer to the reducer
Okay.
if we're using the reducer in the first place.
Reducer to hold the data.
Correct.
Okay.
What do you guys think here? Just we ready to move?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's gonna crash. I'm not even gonna test it. I'm just telling you right now, it's gonna crash. Who can see why?
Map doesn't have current location.
So we
Put my screen over here for a reason.
need to.
I'll send the position.
Map column state
You need to articulate better. What do you mean?
on the
Oh,
line
we need
99.
Line 90,
Oh, sorry, 93.
93. What should I do here?
Yeah.
Map column state.
So what did we forget to do until just now?
Hook up. Take the map and put it into props.
Correct, the map reducer. Right, we forgot to connect the map reducer to the container. So until line 93 was established, this would have been undefined right there, that variable, which means the whole thing would have crashed. Right, so now it's defined, so we can test it. So now, let me just make sure Webpack isn't complaining. Right here, it broke for a second, but I fixed it, so Webpack is happy again. And then let's run the dev server. Now this time, when I add a new item, the center of the map is roughly around here. So when I map test, it'll put it, well, I guess down here, right down to where the center of the map is. Does that make sense? And if I do map test 2, the center is a little bit off, but
Oh, it's just adding on top. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we're not changing the lat long.
that's 3. You see how, like, every time I add a new item, it's where the map is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. My center is off because of the fixed height. Let's fix that right now because that could be a nuisance. So
Yeah.
let's go back. Well, before I do that, does everyone see the same behavior?
Yes.
Okay. So
Can you wait for 1 second?
Yep.
So in results.js on that function const state to props equals state in the parentheses, and when you're adding those variables in that return function, that's basically giving results.js the ability to call those variables in this dot props.
That's it.
Okay.
It's literally called state to props for that reason.
Okay. It would make more sense if it, yeah, I guess if you could call state.props.map.current location, but this is referring to the
State
results
dot
container.
Props. State dot props.
But this is referring to the results container, and then state.props is adding state.map to the container, so you have access to the map variable.
Yeah, you want to think of this as the reducer, the
Yeah.
map reducer.
Okay. So we're that in that diagram. This is in the reducer part. Yeah, I'm gonna pull up that diagram. I gotta like have that all the time. So. Would you Google like React data flow diagram?
React Redux diagram.
Okay, so it's the reducer box.
Alright, I'm putting it on Slack too, so you can just use that. So, let's see, where was I? Okay, does everyone have this working? I'm going to tweak the map configuration because it's making it a little disorienting. So let's go back to search.js.
You're gonna change the height.
Yeah, let's get rid of this height over here. And let's use this over here. Going back to Travis's suggestion yesterday, using the viewport thing. Test. Okay, so now it's like centered. You see that?
Yeah.
So if
So
I
it changed to instead of 100% use 100 EM.
VH.
Yes.
So if I move the map around to a totally different location, so Central Park, and I put in another item, this time it'll put the marker right on the center of the map, the visual center,
Yeah.
which is obviously a better user experience.
And every time you refresh a page, you lose all the data.
Right, because everything's being stored
Regular
client
JavaScript
side.
principles. Yeah.
Right, but today we're going to fix that problem. So when we create a new item, it'll go to the server, and then everything will be persisted. So that hopefully we'll get there soon, definitely by lunchtime.
Can I see your search.js then part of the map?
So there's a container and then another map container inside of that where you put those two styles. Is that how the Google Maps thing renders? There's two containers for it.
One more time? Oh, the down
Container
here.
element and map element.
You know, honestly, I don't know. These are the Google Maps API calls.
Okay.
This is not up to me. All I know is that Google Maps requires you
Yeah,
to insert that.
they take that and translate it and
Right.
the styles on the map. Okay. It's interesting you have to pass in div style equals instead of just height 100.
Mm.
I wonder why they require that div style in there.
Yeah,
I
all I
guess
know
you
is that
could-
you can
you
just
can
hard code it and you'll
Different
be good.
HTML containers, I guess.
That's true. How are you guys doing with the code? Everything working? Bars? Good? Okay. So there's a couple shortcuts I took for the sake of convenience. Well, let's fix that now because we're getting closer and closer to a good, well-organized project. So if you go to the reducer, let's go with the map reducer. You'll see that we have the location change string right here, and if you open up the actions, we also have that reference over here. Very poor form to have two strings separately like that. Those should be centralized in a central config file. And that's what this constants directory is for, which we haven't used yet. So what we want to do is create a series of constants, basically macros, that we can use throughout the project that are all centralized in one location. So let's get that location change string over here and open up the constants folder. Let's comment these out because these are just for example. And let's create our own constants. Let's create location changed. And we had one more, which I believe is item added. Let's grab that one too while we're at it. Okay, you guys with me? So now we want to use these constants rather than just raw strings. That's just a better architecture. So if we go to the actions file, we need to import those constants, which they're already here, so that's good. So really we want to do this. You see that? Line 8. Yeah, I commented it out this time. So line 8 is what it used to be. Line 9 is what it is now. Does that make sense? And then obviously same thing down here.
Oh, that's cool. The IDE recognizes those. It knows all the constants. Oh,
Yeah. Okay, which means we want to reference the same thing in the reducers. Okay. So open up your map reducer. Make sure you import the constants over here, and just do the same thing.
oh, you have to import that every time.
We do now because we're using it.
React doesn't just know it all. It seems like it could just always go to that constants directory and pick those up. But
No, it doesn't. There's no like. It's not implied in any way.
yeah. Did you have to import it on the index for actions?
Yes, but it turns out it was already there in the scaffold. I just forgot that.
Oh, okay, alright. So I feel like, yeah, that's gonna be like in almost a lot of files. They should kind of just do that automatically, but alright.
Yeah, well, really what that means is in my scaffolding, I should just automatically do that. If you look at the user reducer, that's a scaffolded one, right? You see how the constants are already there?
Yeah,
So
got it, alright.
we also had the item reducer, so let's go ahead and do that.
Did you change this case? Yeah, you changed it on case, right?
Yes, right here. So this would be considered better organization.
Yeah, so our switch statement, we're pulling it from that const.
And you can console log it too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't have to like stringify it or
No, they're already strings.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
just
yeah.
raw strings.
Okay. Item reducer.
Okay. Alrighty, so let's just go ahead and run through it one more time just to make sure we didn't break anything along the way. So, I mean, so far so good. We're still seeing the same thing. If I move the map and add a new item, test, everything still works, so we're good to go.
Does Redux pair well with like Firebase?
Yes, actually it does quite well. In the December course, that's one of the projects towards the end where I just do like a live application using Firebase.
What is Firebase?
It's a live data feed kind of, where you can post data to the Firebase backend, and all connected clients will receive the notification up
Okay, that's cool.
to real time. So
Oh, that'd be nice for a sheet. Like, somebody submitted an event, like all the right services again.
that's exactly what I was thinking yesterday about time saving. Like what I would do is connect something to a live chat live data feed,
Yeah.
so that every time something gets posted to that, it'll trigger the update, thereby bypassing the every 5-minute caching system.
Yeah.
I would do that.
Multicast.
What's that?
Does it multicast?
Yeah, well, Firebase is meant for those those scenarios. So that's one thing I'll do right away, so that you can get away from the every 5 minutes of resetting the cache and just reset on an as-need basis.
So I'm still confused actually. So for example, if you have new event, so you're saying instead of using an API, you would push it using multicast.
All right, so where were we? So we have this working, right? And we have the items set up.
Adding items.
Okay, so that's good to go. Where were we? Keep on losing track of what else I'm going to do next. Let's see. Update reducer. Oh, okay, so what I want to do next now is, if you look at the reducer, the item reducer, you know, like I was saying earlier, I took a few shortcuts for the sake of convenience. I did that in the reducer as well. If you look at the items array, the all array, the schema in here is basically formatted for the benefit of the map, right? We have like a naming convention here that's really for the map's benefit rather than like our project per se, right? Like default animation is not really an attribute we want to store, right? Or like label, it shouldn't be label, it should be name, right? So this is a little bit, I want to move away from this, okay? So let's create another array. Let's comment this out and create an array. With name. Let's get rid of the default animations. I don't want to store that in here. And we'll go with ID as strings. Okay, so this is a schema that's a little bit more consistent with our application. Like we're not like forcing our schema for the benefit of the Google Maps, right? It should be the other way around, right? So let's take this and make sure our map doesn't get messed up, which right now it will, because we just lost a bunch of properties, right? So let's grab one of these as a reference. Just want to make sure I didn't forget to record this. Okay. So let's grab one of these as a reference, and then let's head over to the search container. So this array now is all messed up. We need to reconfigure this. So let's create another array. This time let's rename it markers, because what are we doing here? We're converting the items into markers now. So let's go through the items array. Okay, here's my reference object. So let's say items have an ID, price, name, and position, but the marker has to be key, right? It requires a key property, which is going to be the item ID. It requires a position property, which is the item position. Default animation, which is just 2. And I think that's all we need for now. This array right here should be plural. I did singular by mistake, so make sure you have that plural. Okay? Right. And then we want to add the individual marker into that array. And then we pass off the markers array to the map. Like that.
Why?
This is just
Why didn't we just let markers equal item dot map? Why are we doing a for each and then push?
because the maps, the items keys or attributes, I should say. Look at these attributes over here. They're not consistent with what the map requires. So the map, we're adding additional properties that the map requires. So,
Yeah, but
oh, I forgot one of them, by the way.
No. But could you typically just do item dot map and then that same function and just return that object's const marker instead of doing a for each and then pushing into I don't know, never mind.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these 6 of 1, half dozen the other, like either or. I like this because it's just more conventional JavaScript.
Yeah.
I forgot this, by the way, the label. So make
The
sure you
label?
include the label.
So we're using Google's what they want and we're adding in our own items.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, Travis, that's more a matter of preference. If you like using the map function, sounds good.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we didn't break anything on the iteration there. Looks like I broke something. Let's see. Item not defined. Search 23.
Oh,
Plural. Sorry, I forgot that. Oh, I kind of went through that debugging process a little bit quickly. I wasn't really thinking in terms of explaining. So there was a thought process that just took place there that's worth pointing out. So I loaded the page, nothing showed up. Obviously something broke, right? First thing I did was I checked Webpack, because basically Webpack is the first line of failure, right? It didn't crash, so Webpack wasn't complaining. So then my next move was maybe there's something in the console. And then I opened the console and it gave me a very nice human readable error message. And right here is the most important line of that. And then I just figured out where I went wrong. And that's it.
And since we took out initial state, there's no markers on the map anymore, right? Well,
I got the same through.
mine doesn't have any markers on it. But I took out initial state. Let me see item reducer.
Yep, right here. I didn't remove them. I
Oh, okay.
reformatted.
I removed that array. That's why. Okay. Now I got them back. That made sense because I removed it.
So we got to make a corresponding update in the other reducer. Who can remember where or like why? In the results reducer, when we add a new item right here, the first input still calls it label. That's the wrong attribute. What should it be now? Name.
Yeah, that's why the names weren't showing up on the items.
Right. And that should be it. Like that should cover for all the changes. So I didn't necessarily have to do this. It's just better overall structure for the project. We don't want to shoehorn our schema into Google Maps' properties. It should be the other way around. So our schema now is more consistent with what we expect it to be. And to be really sure about that, let's just add one more item.
Yeah, I'm not seeing names on the items.
Okay, let me just make sure I didn't make a mistake. So, cool, so that's back in business. So we're good to go with that.
How come the items up top don't have names though?
Oh, good question. Because the item that I forgot the item component.
Oh yeah.
Good catch. So here in the item component, right, we're still using label, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What should it be? Name. Thanks for pointing that out.
for some reason I still don't have the only markers. The thing's not coming up. The name. Can you go back to I guess search.js?
Yeah, I did forget this initially, so make sure you have that.
they're not on the markers.
Yeah, Travis is saying the same thing. So it's possible that I like. I'm on TV. Hold on. All right. So initially I forgot this line right here, line 26. At first I forgot it. So maybe you forgot it as well because I didn't have that initially.
I added that one. Yeah, I got that one there. Do you have your map has names on the markers? Let me see real quick.
I believe so.
Yeah, it does. Search.
Can you see item reducer?
Item reducer right here.
Works.
Oh, whoops. Oh, I didn't make marker equal markers. I was still looking at the items.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
me
yeah.
too. I had that
That's-
too. Oh, didn't we make that?
Yeah. Yeah. Because now I was.
Oh yeah,
still
we're
looking at
using
items.
const marker, and
Yeah.
it's let markers equal this array. Okay, so yeah, we gotta change the markers. Yeah, okay. It's working.
Cool. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna take these item components. I'm just sort of spitballing a little bit here because we're actually ahead of schedule. So I'm gonna just improvise a little bit, and I'm gonna take this over here where it says updated now in the item component, and right there.
When you add, can I just see you add one?
Oh yeah, sure. Okay.
Or you and then add one and then go to your console. I think we need to stringify. Yeah, we need this to string
Yeah, the same thing.
the
Same problem as
yeah
before.
that same thing we ran into yesterday.
Right. So let's see that. Item reducer. That's only when we add, right? So when we add a new item, so where is that? In the results container.
Results.
Add item, and then here is the ID. That should be a number 100. And we can actually remove these, by the way. So we should do some more cleanup here, so that's a good call. Because the key and the default animation, we remove those, so we don't want those. Let's get rid of that.
Oh yes. And then you could just do like in like brackets this dot props dot item dot length plus 1 and then 2 string, because then it would like increment.
Are they gonna have the same keys or something?
Item dot length.
It wouldn't be item, it would be item all.
Yeah, they're
It'll
the
be
same
item.
key.
Dot all. So item dot all dot length. Plus 1. Const. And then it is 2 string, right? This part I
Yeah.
always forget. Right? Okay, so it is 2 string.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you put? Do you have to make that const, or can you just do it in one line?
You don't have to do it this way. I just find
You
it
can do
easier
it
in
in line, but if you're going to call toString on that, you have to wrap it in
parentheses.
Or in
Yeah, because you don't want plus one to have
not
first.
parentheses.
Oh, why would it be in parentheses?
Look like this. In order to call the toString method on.
Yeah, that's a parentheses.
Yeah.
Cool. Looks good. All right. This is overall an improvement. So it's getting more and more tightly organized. So let me just clean this up a little bit. Alrighty. Let's see. Oh yeah, let's go back to the item component and where it says updated now. Let's get rid of that icon. And this should be, let's have that be the username of the person who posted the item, okay? So for now, we're just hard coding it. Okay, so right now LeBron James is selling a lot of stuff, but that should come from the item itself.
Yeah.
This right here, see that?
Yep.
Okay. So inside the item reducer,
Can you go back to the itinerary.js?
Mhm. I just hard coded a username.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
So we removed the updated now and we just hard
Yeah.
coded it, right?
I think that would be the most intuitive thing to put there is just the user of the seller, the username of the seller.
Sure. Yeah. But where do we fix the username though?
I'm sorry?
Where do we fix the username?
That's the next
We're gonna
step.
do that.
That's what we're doing right now. So if we go to our item reducer, inside each one of these, let's add another object called profile, which will be username. And let's leave it at that for now. Let's not make this too complicated. So add that for each one of these items, obviously, but mix up the usernames.
I like how you avoid presuming because his name's hard to spell.
I'll just mess that up. Okay. And now we have just a user reference inside the item itself. So going to the item component, we can now reference that inside the component, because remember, the item is passed in as a property, right? So we can do item here, we can do item. I'm sure you can see where this is going, right? Item.profile.username. And then it'll show the username of the seller. Okay. How does that look on your end?
What is the last change you made in the,
Right here, right here.
so this is item?
Can I see your list of brackets on item reducer for the object? I'm just making sure.
Right here.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I got an extra.
While we're still tweaking the schemas and whatnot, instead of profile, let's go with seller. So again, I'm kind of just thinking out loud here. Since we're at a schedule, I want to make sure we make the right decisions. So then in the item component, don't forget to make that change.
Yeah.
So can you do that item component?
Sure.
So
Okay. So what we're doing is we're sort of preparing the front end to start interfacing with the back end, right? We want to make sure the data is consistent. That's why I'm doing all this cleanup now, right? We don't want to have to make all these changes on the back end. That becomes a real pain, right? So we want to make sure that everything's sort of properly configured on the front end to the extent that we can. There's no way you're going to avoid making changes in the back end completely. That's basically impossible, but to whatever extent that we can, we should, right? So let's go ahead and make sure this is all cleaned up. And this is what we're going to eventually send to our server, right? So we're going to need the location, the seller, things like that. Does everyone see the same behavior?
Mhm.
Okay. Let's see here. Everyone go to Google Images and let's look for a picture of LeBron James. We do want a square picture, so take the size and make sure it's something that's exactly a square. And let's go with this. Grab this image right here. Okay, make sure it's a perfect square. And then let's add that to this guy right here. I'm in the item component, so make sure you have that item.
Where'd you save it to?
I didn't save it. I'm just gonna hot like
oh,
this.
you're gonna, okay,
Yeah.
alright.
It's gonna be a big, obnoxious, intrusive image. There it is, and then let's make sure that now let's format this guy. So we want this to be an icon, so a very small size would be good, like 32. And then let's see how this looks. Okay. It's moving in the right direction. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And let's throw that guy to the right side. Okay. So 32 is a little bit big. Let's go with 28. 14, and float this guy to the right. Okay, that float command didn't work, so let's try this instead.
Text the one, might do it.
Yeah, that'll probably work too. There we go, much better. All right, so I threw it out above the stats div because there must be some formatting going on here that I'm not aware of. So I just threw it on top, and that's a better location for that. Okay, and then while we're here, let's go ahead and make this a local style because we confirmed that it worked, right? So let's go ahead and make that a local style. Let's just call it icon. And let's use that instead. Okay, that's a much better appearance. I think this is a better user experience. And just make sure you have that on your end.
Let's see where you put local style.
Sure.
Outside.
So now if you think about it, this is a property that should come from the seller's profile, right? So what are we doing here? We're just setting up the UI. We've confirmed that the UI looks appropriate. So now we've got to throw this data into the seller object inside the item JSON. What we're really doing is we're further filling out the seller schema. That's really what we're doing. Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and grab this URL. Okay, let's grab that guy. And inside the source, we do item.seller.image. Right? Of course, that key doesn't exist right now, so let's go back to our reducer and fill in the appropriate images. Okay, this is the change I made right here. Make sure you cover that.
Right.
Okay. So let's go back to the item reducer now. And let's fill out some images. So image. Okay. Right now they're all LeBron James, so that's not going to work. So we have Kevin Durant.
You're just grabbing different.
Yeah. Okay, there's Kevin Durant. And Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, we're using the images from the NBA API.
Oh no, I didn't know they had that.
We use this API to get the profile images.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Are those like licensed? Like, can I just use that in my own stuff?
I think if you're not using an NBA site, I think
I don't think it matters what we're doing. It's funny because that CDN you're using, every site has their own like CDN, and they all, those player profile images get automatically updated.
Cool. Okay, so now we have some data kind of more reflective of a realistic scenario. However, this does present a problem down here in the add item situation, right? Who can identify the problem we just sort of added to the situation? Okay. Who has this working? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to pause the video then while we debug. Okay, actually, while we're on the topic, let's finish out the item schema and add the item image right now so we don't forget. So we have a pair of shoes, a sofa, and a TV. Let's just get those in there so we have basically all of our schemas filled out for the most part, and so that we're ready for the back end. Okay? So let's find some images of TVs, Air Jordans, all that stuff. Same thing, make sure they're perfectly square images. Okay? You may be asking why, so that we can standardize all the icon sizes so that the UI is consistent across the board.
Yeah, this the border radius won't work if they're not square.
Okay, so here are the item has its own image called image. This time I'm going straight to the reducer because we kind of have the flow figured out, right?
Right.
So let's this time we can just go right to it.
How did you actually in Google search just define the height and width? I know that's.
Yeah, sure. So if you just do a search for an image, inside the tools,
What's the tools?
yeah, tools, they give you a size option. You can say exactly whatever. Right.
So you're making image its own field?
Yes, inside the item this time.
Yes. It's not part of like another object.
Spot screen, TV.
Weird URL address. I hate it when Google doesn't give you like the Do they have to be a certain size or no? We're gonna force that, right?
Yeah, they have to be just square. So if it's 400 by 400 or 2000 by 2000, whatever, as long as it's a square.
You put it under div XS5.
Correct. And then I removed what was there previously.
Oh, the icon big.
Yeah. Let's try 6 and 6 on these divs. Yeah, I'm not crazy about this. It'll have to do for now, though. Maybe we can try this instead. Try 12 and 12. All right, I think that's a better look. So I just made both divs columns 12s, so it gives you 2 rows basically.
Okay. Are you gonna make a style for that, or just style it? in
No, 100% is the width. You can make a style for that. It's up to you. I don't know what you think about that. That little border around it. Do you guys like that?
It's very Instagram.
Yeah.
And
All
I
right.
see item.js.
Item.js, yeah. So now I will make a style out of this because there's more in here. So make the style item.
How much border did you do?
3 pixel padding. Border is 1 px solid, triple D for the color. Gonna go with the background here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Okay. I think it looks okay. I think it looks better than before. Do you guys have this working?
Can you go back to item.js?
Most of the changes were over here.
Still adding styles.
Later, can I get the style?
Sure. Right here. The style isn't like crucial. I'm just sort of, freestyling.
I just want to make it.
Yeah.
That's just nothing fancy.
pictures are small.
Excuse me. Check your column sizes. Make sure they're both 12. So
Oh,
right
okay,
here.
you change that, alright.
Yep.
Wait, both of them are 12? The
Correct.
item name and price is 12 too?
Yeah, so it gives you that row appearance, that vertical appearance.
Alright, I got it.
And I'm assuming that the bootstrap column structure you already understand,
Yeah.
but if you don't, let me know.
Can you just like slack out the URLs that you're using for the images?
Sure.
The images I pulled down, there's like they're coming in program.
So here, I'm just going to give you the entire array. So here are the 3 items I'm currently using.
And the hex color for the background, is that in quotes or not?
Yes, but it turns out it doesn't even matter. It just didn't come out looking good at all. So
So can I see the upper?
Yeah, it would only look good if you had PNGs, I guess.
yeah, sorry, Forrest.
A little upper.
Yeah.
I want to see the change. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you would do PNGs.
So while we're all kind of working on our code, I'll explain the sort of the dilemma that's presented by adding a seller attribute to the item. When we create our item on the the results container, the seller is not defined. Right? That presents a problem. Just like the default location wasn't defined. Right now we can hard code the seller again like we did before, but really what we want to do is build in the functionality where the seller is you, whoever is posting the item, right? So what that means is we got to move on to creating more functionality, which is user registration, auth, things like that.
Sure.
The seller has at least one attribute, or 2, excuse me, username and image, but it also has, we're also going to use email and phone number so we can notify the seller via email and text message when somebody wants to buy your item, okay? And hopefully we'll get through all that by the end of the day, which I think we should, and that'll be essentially a fully functional project at that point. People could actually use it, buy stuff.
So quickly, can you go back to the diagram?
The title?
The diagram of the
Oh, sure.
life cycle?
Yep.
It's not right.
Mhm.
So in this case, we have the container for the items that we call it results,
Yes.
right? So the base item itself, we're defining it like because it's reusable. The reducer level is when we're trying to define who the user is, or who's sending it and what it is,
That's happening here, correct.
right? So the action in the initial case is just the page load that's causing this.
One more time?
The action
Mm-hmm.
in this flow, it's item action, component action, and the reducer, right?
Okay.
Is page load itself considered an action, so to speak?
Which one?
The page load.
No, that is not an action. No, we'll end up using, you want to override certain functions in a React component. On page load, that will be called component did mount. We'll probably end up using that this afternoon to identify the current user. It'll all make sense when we get to it this afternoon.
Okay.
How are we doing on this so far? Everyone's good to go? Forrest, you all set? All right. Now what we're going to do is create a user registration form on a totally different page without using React for the sake of convenience. Okay, I want to just create a quick form, a post form, which is going to be our de facto landing page where people can sign up, and then it'll bounce you to this page. The key challenge there is to maintain the current user. Like, who is the currently logged in user? We want to maintain some sort of session structure so that if the currently logged in user turns off the computer and comes back an hour later, he's still logged in. Right? That's the effect we want to create. And then we want to use that within our React project to assign the user the seller when you create a new item. So that's the next sort of phase of this operation. Okay? So it's kind of a lot going on there, so I want to make sure everyone's code is stable before we get to that.
Where are restrooms on this floor?
I don't know. This is actually the first time I've been on this floor.
Yeah, there is. If you go out
He did
to
100%.
by where the lobby is, like where the front desk is,
Uh-huh.
if you go right.
Sure.
All right, so now let's create like a very basic like registration page as well as login. So we'll do both. We're not going to do that in React just for the sake of time. So we can just quickly do user auth, and then we'll get back to the React side and figure out the logged in user and all that stuff. So notice how I sort of shut down all the files here. Okay, do the same thing because we're actually going to shift over to the back end of this project now. So when we load the page on localhost 3000, we're loading literally an HTML file, which is the index.mustache right here, right? This is where we kind of started yesterday, right? So what if I want to create a whole different page that has nothing to do with React? We want to do it inside this views directory, right? So let's do that right now. So go to the views directory, and let's create a auth mustache file. Good. And these pages are served through the routes directory. Okay? So the auth file, auth mustache is empty because we just created it, right? Okay? So let's copy and paste our index into here just to get started, right? Just to have something to work with. Now again, this is not going to be React Redux. So let's remove these two imports because we don't need them. We don't want to waste downloading imports. And then we don't need the root.
So just copy over index mustache into auth mustache.
And it's
Wait,
just
so
going to be
you
a
don't
very...
need a commons and app.
Correct. Those are the React bundles. We're not using React here. We're just going to set up a very primitive HTML form just to get some easy user auth going and then get back to the React side, hopefully within 20 minutes.
That's all the changes that we did, right?
That's it. Don't forget this right here.
So I'm gonna say.
Okay, so like I was saying earlier yesterday, this scaffold is a conventional Node Express project. It's as conventional as I could make it. It's very, very simple. So what that means is the pages are rendered through routes, just like you would expect. It's literally Express. So if I open up the routes file, this index route right here is the one that renders pages based on what route you're calling. So the home page route is the very first one, line 8, or line 5 now. So I'm going to create another route. Let's get rid of these guys. I'm going to remove this guy right here and create another route called auth. And this route will render the auth template. Okay? And it's, like I said, just regular Express, right? So we do res.render, and we pass in the template we want to render, and any dynamic data, but the dynamic data is null in this case. And that's essentially it. That'll render the auth page. Good? So let's test that. So fire up the dev server. It's already working for me, so let's go ahead and try it out.
You want to render auth and then common null.
And there it is.
And auth is a string.
So now we're rendering just a regular HTML page, right? No React, no nothing, just HTML.
Can you go back to the page, the auth page? What did you see in the auth page when you
The mustache file?
No, on the browser.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You display? Okay.
I'm
Can you
gonna-
go to the index.js?
Index.js,
Next,
yeah,
please.
right here.
Very small.
This is all I did right there. Are we good? So I just noticed that we're missing a file, or you might be missing a file. If you clone from my repo, then you definitely are missing a file. It's the .env file, because the .env files are not in the Git repository. So we have to restore that. Why? Because if you look over here on line 1, the app ID is being referenced from the .env file. In this situation, it doesn't exist. This will crash the project. So we need to create a .env. But again, you might already have it, because if you did not clone into my repo, you probably already have it. So,
Just making it in the root.
yep, top level. And then your project ID should be corresponded to your app ID.
Oh, it
So-
already exists.
Yeah, go ahead and check if it already exists.
I downloaded from the repo and I had it, but
And make sure your app ID is consistent with your app ID rather than mine.
yes.
We also need a session secret. This will. So you probably already have this as well,
Yeah.
right? Do you guys have that session secret?
Oh, but mine says your session secret.
Oh, yeah, you can leave it there. But the key is what? Session secret?
With the router.
The left side,
Session.
Session secret, yeah.
right? And then you can just put a random number here. Literally anything
No,
will do,
so
Random
we
number.
or
get
letter.
rid of
Like
this
just
root
type in
name,
some random characters.
Alright.
And he just opened up the empty div with an H2.
I don't have to
inside.
copy that from the website right now. Turbo 360, alright.
And what was the third key? There's a third key.
Turbo CDN.
We could ignore that for now.
And then there's turbo environment.
Oh, that one we need. Turbo,
If you look at the, yeah, there it is.
Underscore env.
turbo, environment.
Underscore
Let me just look at what you have.
It's just env.
Turbo.
Gotcha.
Is this how you set what environment you're in, or do you set it in that other file? Because there was another file we were setting the environment in the Webpack or JSON or something. Or,
No, this is how you set your environment variables. So when you deploy,
yeah.
these get registered into your project, but the env file does not go up. That's why when you clone into my project, it's not there. So what I do is I take the keys here and I set your config variables as you deploy, but I leave the env file behind.
So what are the choices? Like staging or prod or what are
Oh yeah, dev and prod, but you have no choice on this one.
Okay.
You don't get to decide that.
Alright.
The system overrides that for you.
I got it. Okay.
But the other stuff you do get to decide.
Cool.
Okay, so now we have our project properly configured, and let's make sure our auth is showing up properly. Okay, I'm going to add a quick styling in the template. I'm going to do class container. Okay, let's add a form. Input type text name email placeholder email class form control. This is probably going to take up the entire screen. Yeah, that looks terrible. So let's put it inside of a row. Big class row. Okay, this will do for now. And I'm going to give the body a background color. Background. Okay. Just very, beginner level HTML, CSS, right? Just throwing a form in there, giving it some basic styling, and then setting up a user registration. So our user registration is going to require email, username, and password, and that's it. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up those inputs: email, username, password. Email, username, password, okay, and then and a submit button. We'll call that sign up or join, whatever you want to call it. Type submit. All right. Class ETN success. All right. Okay, so we have a form, very conventional, plain vanilla HTML, CSS. The real question is, where do we send this data? Now, how do we actually connect the form to an actual sign up, right? We got to do that next. So let me know when you're ready with this, and we'll get back to the back end and actually hook up this post form. Good? Yeah, as front end devs, this should be like nothing to you. Like this is just basic HTML, CSS, right? So let me know if any of this is tripping you up.
It's an extension. Yeah, LastPass.
So right now we have a post form which sends data to nowhere. It's obviously a problem. So what we want to do is create a route to receive this data. Okay. So I'm going to create another route, call it auth route, so that it has a location to send the data to. Okay. Let's go ahead and do that right now. So inside here, we want to cd the routes directory and create an auth route. Okay, just like that. Okay. If you open up the auth route, obviously it's empty because we just created it. So open up the index route as well and copy and paste it over into the auth route so we have some initial content. But strip out all the stuff inside. Just leave it empty like this.
So we copied from
The index route,
the base.
right? Just to get some initial content going, that's all. Now you probably know by now, forms should send requests via post. I'm sure we all know that by now, right? So this router should be a post. Okay, and let's create a path for this guy in particular called register, which will handle the registration functionality. Okay, and then for now, we're just going to send the JSON right back to the client. It'll just bounce it right back, just to make sure everything works. And post data inside of an Express environment is packaged inside the body key of the request. If you've done Express before, that should be pretty comfortable.
Express, this is just regular JavaScript, or it has to do with React at all? Or?
There's no React concepts here. This
Okay.
is regular Node Express.
Alright. You said Node?
Node,
Okay.
correct. We're doing Node programming
It's
right now.
not like vanilla JavaScript. Okay.
No.
Got it.
We're specifically doing Node Express right now. So we got to hook up this route. It's not connected yet. So go to the app.js in the root level. Okay. Import the route right here. And then define the path right here. Lines 9 and 14 are what I just did. Okay, 9 and 14. So now we have a route sort of on standby, ready to receive our post requests. So let's go back to the form and connect it to that route, right? So we go back to our auth mustache. The form should have two attributes: action, which is auth register, and method, which is obviously post. So you see how we're sending the data to the route we just created, right? I would imagine this part is, you can kind of see the connections here. Line 25 is where I made the changes. Which means we can now test it. So if we go back here and run the dev server, except spell it right, dev server, head over to the auth page this time and fill out some fake data. So LeBron James at gmail.com. LeBron James. And there it is. That's the route that we just set up to receive data. And as I said earlier, it's just bouncing the data right back to us. So we've confirmed that the data is being successfully captured.
cannot post auth.
Do you have like a plugin running that makes your JSON look nice like that?
And
Oh
actually
yeah,
listen to
yeah, that's
the video,
correct. JSON formatter from.
Yeah, I've just been looking for one.
Yeah, I always forget that I'm using this.
in the root in app.js, you add the route.
Auth.js, right?
Oh, I got it.
In app.js.
It's in the Slack channel too. So.
Okay, you add that. And then how about index.js? This one.
Oh, now I'm getting cannot post.
Off. And then result render off. Null.
What's the original URL you started?
Uh, right here.
Method equals post. Here.
It worked the first time, the second time.
And then action equals we need to equal sign.
Cache maybe?
Action
Okay, yeah, it
equals.
was. I think I had like a cache pulse or something.
I'll try it again right now.
Do you have an equals with that? Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm just curious, since I don't have like a ton of Node experience, is there anything else we had to do in auth.mustache to use Node, or it just works like natively?
No, this is a pure HTML form, so this has nothing to do with Node. You could hook this up to a Ruby backend, Python, Django, whatever. The Node stuff is everything we did inside the routes and the app.js.
Oh, so that stuff inside of auth, register, that's just regular JavaScript?
Yep, you can send that to a PHP backend, wherever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you
the
want
actual-
that.
Yeah, that's what I
And
have more experience with this,
Oh,
is
there's
posting
nothing
forms
that-
to PHP files, I've just never posted it to a JavaScript file. So.
Yeah, it's the same idea. So when you send it to it probably like register.php,
Yeah,
and then on the back end it receives the body parameters
yeah.
in like whatever attribute they use.
Sure,
It might
sure.
actually just be body. I don't really know. And
You
then,
can access them individually, the inputs, yeah.
right, and then
So-
you use that to create your data.
Okay.
So right here, this file right here,
that
auth.js,
is
in PHP, this would be called auth.php, and then you
Yeah.
receive all the form data.
Okay.
Okay, are we seeing the JSON when we post?
I'm getting a success. I just want to see the JSON.
So
Okay.
here is where I'm assigning it, so make sure you have the same thing.
That's auth.js, right? Data equals.
And if you do see this, then chances are it's in your actual form. Make sure you have the name attributes properly assigned.
I didn't do placeholders.
So another question in auth.js, sorry if you, or I'll let you finish on this one. What is that const router equals vertex router? What's vertex router?
So this is the express router that's designed to handle incoming requests,
Okay.
HTTP requests.
Yeah.
The vertex router is just an abstraction above the express router. That's where I step in. Like I come in and I wrote that code.
Got it.
However, I didn't mutate the code. It is an express router. I'm returning literally the express router.
Got it.
And so there's no need to like relearn the APIs for
Sure.
Vertex.
Sure.
The reason I did that though is because when you deploy, it's not running Express. Because remember, Express is a server application.
Yeah.
Everything's not on servers, it's on
Yes.
Lambdas.
Got
So
it.
I had to rewrite the Express framework for AWS Lambda.
Okay. I understand.
That was very unfun.
Yeah.
So that's why you're seeing a lot of this, like my own personal APIs.
Because
But-
if you wrote this without that, it might not really work in locals correctly. without that router.
Yeah, you could even just literally use the express router here. It'll work, believe it or not. Like if I do this, express router, I have to import express first.
You don't have to go through all that.
No, but this is a good exercise conceptually.
Sure.
That will work because when I do the vertex router, it's doing that anyway.
Yeah.
is my
You're
point.
starting out with that.
Right.
Okay. Got
So I just don't want people to think that I rewrote the APIs. I did not.
it. Sure.
That would be very hard to learn all that.
Got it. All right.
Are you good? We good, Christian?
It's okay. It's nothing to be. That's good.
So I'll pause the video because it's going to depend a lot on what we do here. So I don't want. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the conventions are consistent across JavaScript frameworks. So like Angular typically uses app.js. Node uses app.js. You know, like it gets a little confusing after a while. Oftentimes, what I see and what I do in my own projects is I have a whole separate code base just for the React. It's on its own repo. Doesn't even know about the server.
That's how we do it on the MSG
Right.
site. Yeah.
That's a better way to keep things a little bit more separate.
Yeah.
That helps cut down
You
that
could
confusion.
do this off page in React though, with React Router, right?
Not the way we're about to set this up. Because we're about to do some server logic here.
Oh, okay.
And we need to set up the server endpoints for that. That's what we're doing right now. So here we have successfully confirmed that the data is going to our auth endpoint, right? We all see the JSON now
Right.
with the email, username, password. So what that means is now we're ready to create actual users. So here we're going to use a Turbo SDK to do that. So comment out that JSON, we're done with that, and then we're going to create a user with the rec.body. This returns a promise. Are we familiar with promises?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can just get right into it then. So So here I'm actually making the API call now to create the actual user in our backend. Okay, we're not going to set up Mongo or Postgres or anything like that. We're just going to go right to the Turbo backend so we can save the time on that. Otherwise, we'll have to add another couple of days to this demo, and I don't want to do that. So we basically just have a working backend right out of the box. We good?
Almost.
So let's try it out. So I go back here to the auth page. I create my user. Hit the endpoint. And here's the success callback, but I'm getting a lot more data now, right? I'm getting database style data, like a unique ID and stuff like that. That means it worked. Okay, so now the next intuitive question is where can we find this data? Where can we retrieve it? So go back to your Turbo dashboard that we created yesterday morning. Here's our project, right? And then click on the data store and you will see your profile you just created.
Wait, so in the dashboard, we go to where did you
The project that corresponds with what you're working on.
go
So
to data store?
correct, data
Okay.
store.
Oh, I
And you
see.
should see the user Now somebody is connected to my project right now because I didn't create this user. So somebody is using my app ID right now. So what that means is don't forget to swap out your app ID.
Sure.
I mean, I don't really care, but it matters that on your end it's not going to work, right?
Right.
So let's make sure that we see the data on your end.
Can I see Alt.js one more time real quick? I think I'm just missing a bracket. Oh, okay, I see.
So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. Also, Krishna, you're capitalizing your attribute names in the form. You want to remove that. Okay, so here where it says name, you have capital letters here.
Right.
That's wrong. You should have lowercase letters.
Yes. So which one did you say?
In your form right here where it says name equals email,
Yeah.
where you have a capital E probably there. And a capital P. Otherwise, these attributes wouldn't be showing up in capital, which they were a minute ago. If you don't, then it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just connect your app ID to your app so you can see the data on your end.
Sure. Maybe an error actually.
Router post. Where does that function end again in Auth.js? I think I'm missing that ending bracket. So all of this stuff is in the router post function.
Yes, this block of code right here. It's just a quick function call to create a user based on the inputs you put in the form. And it returns a promise with a success and an error callback. Standard promise sequence.
So we're looking at data store, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should see it there.
Oh, I got it.
Maybe if you probably, since you hook up, you put some new,
And then we go to the dashboard. What are those users in the data store?
The data store, assuming it worked.
Yeah,
It should
I
be.
got it. All right.
And then you can edit it, you can remove it, whatever.
So you made this data store kind of to help people develop without having to spin up like a database
You
in
got
a
it.
local environment. That's awesome.
As well as like a real database. And
Yeah,
hook it up to a real database environment.
yeah. Does it have any type of schema that's similar to like Mongo or SQL or
You will very much like Mongo. I modeled the entire environment the way Firebase did.
Okay,
So it works a lot like Firebase.
cool.
So this right here cut out like 6 hours of more workshop we would have to do to set up
Yes,
Postgres
that's
and all
So
the
you
other
don't
stuff.
have to MongoDB try to get fetch information and all that. Right?
I'm sorry, one more time?
So you don't have to have something like a MongoDB.
No, correct. You don't have to. Now, right as of now, Turbo, you can't use Mongo right now or Postgres or anything like that because I didn't build it in yet. But it's been requested enough times that I'm going to build in that functionality. But right now, this is the way you do it.
I think if people are probably going into staging, they're gonna have to hook up to Mongo anyways. They want to do it locally just in case, you know.
Well, what it is, they're comfortable with what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right, so they've learned to do a certain way, and they want to sort of maintain that.
Yeah.
I understand that. So
No, I like this though. It's really cool. So
Yeah.
I've never seen something like that
in the
local
database.
setup that just has like this database
In the
for you
data store.
that
Right.
does, you know, it's pretty good for just
Yeah.
doing your initial local development, building
Right.
small features out and stuff like
what
that.
I'm trying to do that Firebase doesn't do, and
Yeah.
hopefully no one from Firebase is watching this, is that Firebase makes you conform to a certain strict set of APIs that they wrote that only works for Firebase. And Meteor is a similar example. If you use Meteor, you have to use a strict set of Meteor APIs that you cannot apply anywhere else. In my situation, that's not the case. These are very conventional APIs that if you decide Turbo is not the answer for you,
Yeah.
you don't have to rewrite everything. You can just swap out from Turbo and put it on Heroku or AWS. It'll take a couple hours, but it won't take a couple months. It's a big difference.
Got it.
All right, so do we have this properly showing up?
Just give me 1 second. Still.
So Turbo create user, that's a function that's that you wrote in Turbo that creates a user on your
You got it. And if there's obviously a handful of functions in the Turbo SDK, which
Yeah.
obviously you don't know right now because this is new to you, so that's why I included this documentation page.
Got it.
And the documentation page right here gives you all the or most of the key functions.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's right.
And obviously there's also an actual documentation page on the
I
website.
think a plugin.
Same thing.
I can tell you what it is.
So I'm getting a response back. I'm just not seeing it on the dashboard.
Why that?
Cool, so now that we've confirmed that users are being registered, now keep in mind they're not being stored in the session. We still don't know who's logged in, right? So really what we should do here, right here on the success callback right here, this is where we should store the session with the current user's unique identifier, right? So what we want to do, let me just double check the schema real quick. Data ID, we want to grab that ID from the callback and store that in the session, okay? So here, we can take the request and set the session to the user's ID so that we can retrieve it later. Now this is the only part of the entire architecture where I went slightly rogue. The session has a specific name that you have to maintain. It's called vertex session. Okay, so this is the only part where I have to impose a little bit of my own rule, which I'm probably going to change later so that you can decide whatever session name you want. But it was sort of a convenience move I made to get this thing working. I'll probably change it by the end of the year so that you can call whatever session you want.
Could you have multiple sessions running with the same ID, or do they have to be unique?
It has to be vertex session,
Yeah.
but we can inside the vertex session you can add as much stuff as you want.
Okay.
Like you see this JSON right here?
Yeah. Once you have your vertex session going, but then you couldn't have another session with the same ID, right? They'll have to have their own IDs.
Well, just imagine the vertex session is just an object.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
and
not
inside,
like a session variable on server, like a PHP session variable, or it's different?
no, it is. It's a
Okay.
similar concept.
Okay.
And then it basically gets stringified, encrypted, all that
Okay.
stuff. And then on the server, on the back end, it gets decrypted and all that nonsense. It's just a big JSON object, so you can
All
shove
right.
in as much stuff as you want
Okay.
in there. So then here, now once I sign up, it's also setting the session. So I have to sign up again to confirm this. So this time I'm going to sign up as Steph Curry. I always wonder if these guys actually have emails like this, like stephcurry@gmail.com.
Well, somebody does. I'm
Someone
surprised
does,
if he
someone
does.
I mean, they were normal people at one point in their lives, right? They just had like LeBron James at yahoo.com.
People buy them in like when they're in high school now.
Okay, so this worked. It returned the same JSON, right? So that part is successful. But keep in mind, along the way, it also created a session right here, which we now have to confirm. Okay? So I'm going to create another endpoint on this route. It's going to be a get. So router.get. It's going to be a current user endpoint. Which takes a request and a response object, same as before. And here, we check the session. And if the session exists, then ostensibly a user is logged in. Are you with me? So if the rec vertex session is null, no one's logged in. Oh, I made a slight mistake here on line 9, excuse me. That's not going to work. The vertex session is an empty object upon which we have to assign keys, so we want to do that. We want to do .user equals user ID. Okay, so
I
actually,
cannot post when I tried that initially, but
yeah, well, this was a mistake anyway, so let's go ahead and correct this right now, and then register another user with the correct session management. Okay, so my apologies. It should have been that.
right.
Now this key right here, the .user key, that could be whatever you want. So that's what I meant by you can bind whatever you want to the
Right.
Vertex session.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and create another user with the proper session management, and this time we can test it with the right. Let's get rid of this for now.
What did you get rid of?
The current user endpoint, just because I messed it up here first. So let's set this up properly. So that was Steph Curry last time. Let's do Dwight Howard. D. Howard. Okay, now it should be properly set with the ID for this user, Dwight Howard in this case. So now let's go back to the auth route and identify the current user properly. So let's get this guy back in. Yeah, what am I doing wrong here? I must be making a silly mistake. Oh yeah, I forgot the parentheses. My fault. Router.get path function there. Rec res current user. Okay. There we go. Okay. If the session Vertex session is null, okay. So I was making silly syntax errors, so I forgot this curly brace right here earlier.
Yeah.
That was crashing it, so apologies. So this should be properly set up now.
Can you go back to the object?
Okay, now if the user key on the Vertex session is also null, that means no one is logged in. So we return null for the user. Okay, so both of these scenarios means no one's logged in.
Both of these in there. Oh,
Both of
users
these,
all-
right.
Okay.
And then last but not least, once we get past these two, that means someone is logged in, so we can just return the user key. Okay, so here we return success.
Why do you return success if no one's logged in?
It's a good question, actually, and I've gone back and forth on this. So, like, when no one's logged in, it doesn't mean failure.
Yeah.
It just means no one's logged in.
Yeah.
Right, so I don't like to return failure here, because it's not like something failed.
Yeah. The
Right.
form worked, but
Right.
nobody logged in. Yeah. Okay.
So,
it's
I
just
used to
success
return
that-
failure
that
here.
the JSON is getting sent.
Yeah,
is
so
what
it's
you're
kind of
saying.
like, how do you think about it?
I got it.
But for a while, I did return failure here. But it's not really failure. It just means no one's logged in. So that's not a failure scenario. It just means
Yeah.
no one's logged in. All right, so here we have, if it gets past these two, that means someone is logged in, or at the very least, the user key is defined in the session. That's what it really means. And then we can just return that guy so we can see who's logged in. And underneath the hood, just so if you're curious, what I am using regular session storage here. This is storing a cookie called Vertex session. The cookie, the JSON is stringified with a secret key that you determine in the session secret. So if you ever want to like deauthorize all users, you can just switch your key, and then that's encrypted on the client side. So it's a huge random string, and that's all happening through conventional mechanisms. Like that's very standard session management.
So now, is the form going to say they're logged in, or?
Yeah, let's test it now. Before I do that, I just want to make sure everyone has the code. So is everyone's code caught up?
One moment.
Okay. So now, bearing in mind what I did before, is the last person I registered as is Dwight Howard, and that registration process also includes the session management. So I should be also currently logged in as Dwight Howard. Does that make sense? So we should test that right now. So let me get the dev server back up and running. And if I go to the current user endpoint in the auth route, I see the ID number right there, right, which belongs to the ID number of Dwight Howard, who I last registered as. Those ID numbers match.
Yeah, last person. Yeah.
Right. Are you with me?
Even though we're signing out, we're using the sign-up form as a registration form, basically.
As a login form as well.
Yeah,
It doubles
login,
as a
yeah.
login.
Yeah.
However, we can also just make another login form, which we'll
Sure.
probably do later. It'll be
Right,
easy.
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Right.
Could you go over to AltJS?
Sure.
So once you make those changes, you try and log in again just to verify it.
No, you don't have to log in again. You should already be logged in. So you want to go to the endpoint /auth/current user. And that endpoint should work across sessions. So basically, if you turn off your browser and turn it back on, you should see the same thing.
Got it.
It's
And
a
that's-
server session, not client side, right? Not a cookie.
Yeah, well, the cookie is stored client side, but it's set server side. It's actually set right here on right here.
Yeah, because it's node. Alright.
That was also-
Maybe you have to do the form first and make a user, and then.
Just the
Oh, you just did it. What? Go to your dashboard and see your. Did it show up in the database?
getting user null.
What's under user in this part?
Okay. For what?
Because let's see if we get an ID. That's the ID that's from the database.
Correct. Now that once we have that, we can now actually get the actual user, right? We want a little bit more than just the ID. We want the entire user. So once we confirm that the user exists, in the session at least, we can make a fetch. Yep.
Can you go up to turbo.create user? Where you're
Right
storing-
here.
Oh, vertex session.user.
Yeah, that was a mistake I made
Oh,
earlier, so
oh.
I'm sorry. You don't set the session to the ID, you set the session.user to the ID. So what that means for you, Travis, is you got to re-register a whole nother user to test that
Yeah.
functionality.
Cool. That worked.
Excellent. So now that we can see that the user ID is being returned, let's take it one step further and actually get the actual user, right? So here we have the ID number, right? So let's grab that. And rather than just returning just the ID number, let's return the full user profile. So we do Turbo. We're using the Turbo SDK again. And we're using the fetch1 method, which is basically a way to get an object by ID number. Okay, and same as before, this returns a promise, so we just do the same promise sort of flow.
Get an object by like a date, like an item in the database by ID number.
Keyed by ID, so everything's indexed by ID automatically.
Okay.
So we're just taking advantage of that.
All right. And you should just teach a class on how to write code really fast and all the hotkeys you're using.
Yeah. I'll teach a class on whatever people pay me to teach a class on. It's not that complicated. Or give me Nix tickets, I'll do that too, like I was saying yesterday. I'll accept compensation in the form of tickets. So here what we're doing is we're returning the full user profile, which is obviously more information than just the ID. So let's test that real quick. Not found. All right, what did I do wrong? Because I forgot the ID key right there. You see that? Even though I told myself not to forget, I still did. Don't forget to grab the ID. It's right there. On line 47, just to be clear, I made a mistake. I forgot to include the ID key right there.
This dot user is just an object, right?
Correct. That's why it says not found. But in reality, it is found. There it is. And there, that's the guy I last signed up as Dwight Howard.
We just go back to current user to verify, right?
Yes. Are we good?
Can I see what? Yeah. Obviously, is that user that you logged in by, right? At that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now if you think about the registration flow one more time, when we get to success callback, returning that JSON like from an actual user experience is very poor, right? Where should it go? It should go to the map UI. That's where it should go, right? So here, instead of returning this JSON, we should do res.redirect back to the home page. But before we redirect to the home page, we set the session, which means as soon as you bounce to the map page, you are currently logged in as whoever you last signed up as.
Yep.
And that's a much more intuitive user flow. Now it makes sense. Are you with me?
So we need to add that line to the root.
Okay, so let's test this guy out. So I got to go back to the auth page and sign up again as a whole other user. And this time, hopefully, it'll bounce me to the map.
After you verify his ID, that's when you're saying
Is that making sense? Is that
That redirect, that's going to be another page load, right?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Is there any way we could do it with Ajax? Or, oops, I didn't know these.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that today, but
It's okay.
it would just take too
But yeah,
long.
All right.
But the answer
It
is
is
yes.
possible, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do what?
Just do it Ajax, like it doesn't multiply. Like you would just like the map would instantly appear after you log in.
Okay, so let's go back to the auth page one more time. And sign up again as a whole other user. But this time, hopefully, when I sign up, it'll bounce me to the map. That's what I want to happen, right? So we do. I'm running out of players. So who's on my fantasy team? Oh, look, his name is too long. Kevin Durant. All right. So now when I sign up, it goes to the map. Excellent. Very good user experience. Now let's check the current user just to make sure that part was also successfully done. And there it is. That's the guy I just signed up as. So now I'm logged in as the person I just registered as.
Is username like unique?
Not right now, I don't think. It's just an
somewhere,
attribute.
yeah. Can't register.
So what we're going to do next, once you confirm this, is that we are going to get the current user in the React code and bind that to our Redux store so that we can then add the user as the seller when we create a new object. That will solve that problem.
There's some weird caching happening with the login form that I got, and I had to refresh it a couple times. It was sending me to off/register, but I cleared my cache and I registered again and it worked. But
Yeah, it might have been the mistake I made earlier where I didn't add this key right here.
okay. Yeah. Maybe it didn't pick that up. All right, that's true. Okay. Cool.
So do you guys see where the logic is going here? So now that we have the user signed in and stored in the session, we can make the request on the React side to grab the current user and then shove that guy into the store so that we maintain that throughout the entire session. So if I create a new item for sale, I'm already logged in. I could also say if I'm not logged in, it'll prevent me from posting an item and say, please log in first. We can do that too now, right? So before we get to that, does everyone have this working? Okay. So now we're essentially done with that for now, the backend. Now we can swing back to the React side and kind of pick up where we left off, right? So if we go back to the React code, if we look at our reducers, we have an item reducer and a map reducer. We're going to want another reducer to maintain who's logged in. Let's not use the user reducer because I want to do everything from the bottom up here. This is kind of like the most important part of the workshop. So let's create another reducer called account reducer, and that reducer's job will be to identify who's logged in and who's not logged in. Okay, so let's cd into the reducers. Let's create an account reducer. Go to the index and export it right away. Go to the stores and take care of that right now because it's very easy to forget this. Okay, and then inside the account reducer, let's set this guy up from scratch.
Would you call it in stores account?
Just account, right? So in the stores registration, it's right here.
Account.
Don't forget to import it on line 3. Very important.
Good.
Right there.
So in stores, we're putting it.
Alrighty.
Go back to the account reducer.
The account, yeah, it's empty. This is it right here.
That'll be okay. So what he's saying to do is create an account reducer and add it to index.js in stores.
Yes.
In the index.js in reducer.
Don't forget this one too, the reducers.
In index.js, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Okay. So now let's get this guy set up. So let's import the constants right away. Set up the initial state.
I'm telling you, that should be globally available. It's like in every file.
The initial state, this reducer is going to be responsible for tracking the current user. Right. That's essentially what we care about in this reducer. So let's create an object, a key called current user, which is initially null. And then we do the export default. State is initial and action. Updated object assign. Switch. Action type. Okay, just like before, we have a reducer that does nothing, but it's a fully qualified reducer. Like it's ready to go when we need for it to do something. Yeah, I might create like a turbo function real quick that'll scaffold this for every new reducer. And like that's it.
That'd be
Yeah.
cool.
Because then it's just like it wouldn't include the current user. It'll just be like this. It'll just give you a quick like here's an empty template reducer. Do whatever you want with it.
5 seconds.
Yeah, that'll only take 20-30 minutes anyway. So I'll probably just do that.
When you say scaffold, that means when you make the file, that code will automatically be there?
Correct.
Or,
And the
okay.
command will be like turbo reducer and then the name.
Okay.
So turbo reducer.
Make a reducer for you.
Right. It'll
Oh,
just
cool.
give you this
Alright,
with the
nice.
name and
Alright.
everything.
Snippets, right?
What's that?
Like snippets.
Yeah, I might just do that. Either or. Are we good?
Yep.
What was I going to do? Okay, so what we need now is a way to actually get the current user, right? That's going to happen through an action, right? So we need an action whose job will be to retrieve the current user if one exists, right? So we've got to go to the actions file, create a new action creator. Called current user, whose job will be to retrieve the current user. However, this action is a little bit different than the first two. Can anyone identify why? It's actually quite different than the first two.
Only happens on page load.
No. It's going to happen on the page load. That's correct. That's not what makes it different. It's a fundamentally different action in a very important regard. Who can tell me what's supposed to happen next from like a request standpoint? How do we identify
Get
the current?
their products or their items?
We got to get the current user, right? How do we do that? How did we do that earlier?
Their ID.
Session.
How do we identify the current user? Well, how do we do it right now? If I want to identify the current user in this browser, how do I do that?
You went to backslash current user.
Auth current user, exactly.
Auth.
Exactly. I make an API request to an endpoint whose job is to identify the current user, right? And it worked, right? That's how we know we're prepared to actually use it, right? So if I go back to the actions file, what that means is in here, what do I need to do?
You have to make like a
Exactly. I got to make the same API request in here. That's a fundamentally different process, though, because the API doesn't return immediately. It might take a tenth of a second. It might take 10 seconds. Your network might be slow. The server might be down. Whatever.
Yeah.
That's an asynchronous action. That's a very different kind of action versus the first two, which happen immediately. Like when the user moves a map, it's done. It's immediate. That's called a synchronous action. Okay. This is called an asynchronous action because it doesn't happen right away. Furthermore, we don't know when exactly it's going to happen. It might be really fast, your network might be crazy fast, or it might be really slow because the server's slow, it's under too much load, whatever. That's an asynchronous action. So we can't just return it right away. That's not going to work. We have to implement an asynchronous action here, which will return the dispatch when the asynchronous action completes.
Yeah.
Okay, this will be pretty much the most complicated concept we get into this workshop. Okay, so we have to set up an action that doesn't dispatch until the callback is ready. Does that make sense? Here, there is no callback. It's synchronous. It's immediate. So it's just, action happens and then the callback is right immediate. That's a synchronous action. This is an async action. Okay? Async actions, like I said, is probably going to be the most complicated concept we get into in this workshop, at least. I do recommend you look it up, the documentation on the Redux documentation, and read through it. It's a good read.
Is it gonna work like a fetch or
Yep.
more complicated than that?
So right here, this documentation is very well organized in terms of explaining the concepts of async actions. We're going to use all this today to create some async actions right now. Okay, so I'll just put the documentation right here. So, first of all, does that make sense? The fundamental difference right now. So we have to create an async action that'll make the API request and then call the dispatch on the callback when it's done, whether it's success or failure. Okay, so what I did for your benefit is create an async actions file that makes API requests for you in this gist file, which we're going to use today. So in this gist file, go ahead and click on that. This guy makes async requests, HTTP requests on your behalf, and it will call the dispatch for you when it's done. Okay, the reason I did this is because going through the concepts here on its own will be about 4 hours. So I'd rather just get it through so you understand conceptually what's happening. Then on your own, you should go home and like pick it apart and figure out what's going on. Okay, so go ahead and copy all this.
Bluebird. That's just is that like
Promise library.
promise library?
Mm-hmm.
Would JavaScript's like built-in fetch method not suffice?
No, it would. I just like super agent better. That's just a personal comfort thing. So
cool.
yeah, it's another one of those like, you know, what library do you use for this? I use this, and people use Axios is a very popular one.
Yeah.
Fetch is obviously, you know, good. It's just what libraries do you like? I would say super agent, the one that I use the most, is probably third on that list. It seems to be Axios is number 1, Fetch number 2, and then super agent number 3. So where was I? Okay, so go back to your terminal and cd into the src/utils. We're going to create a utility library who makes asynchronous HTTP requests. Okay?
Did we copy that to one of the files?
I copied it. I'm about to paste it.
Okay.
So we're going to create a new file called http async.js, like that. Make sure it's just like that. Okay, and just go ahead and create that file. And then all the code you copied from the gist, just dump it in there. And this is going to be our async request module for today. Again, I do recommend you go home and like piece through it. It's not that much code. It's worth understanding the mechanics behind it. So you can create your own async methods for other libraries. Like maybe you want to create like an async.
This is exactly what
Yeah. Sorry?
No, David, like, this code looks like so familiar. I wrote, like, most of our, like, the Nix website, like, how we're handling, like, asynchronous, like, calls
Yeah.
to our database.
Okay.
Yeah, same
With fetch and promises.
Similar, yeah, APIs.
Syntax, yeah.
That's what I meant by just personal preference, whether like you want to use super agent or
We had another developer write it like with vanilla JavaScript with XHTTP requests and then
XHR
like
requests,
on ready state
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And then his code was
I just wanted to avoid, like, callbacks.
Yeah, I had a problem with that with another client last year who tried to do that, write everything at the lowest level, plain vanilla JavaScript,
Yeah.
to remove all library dependencies.
Yeah.
I don't know why people go down that road.
I had to rewrite all that code because it wouldn't work.
It's exactly what I did. So I tried to explain to my client, like, whoever wrote this made a lot of decisions that you're paying for right now, and you'll be paying for it perpetually unless you do a rewrite. It's a conversation you just get used to over time. Like I've had that conversation
I couldn't
many
keep
times.
track of if the request was done or not, and I couldn't do other functions I needed to run, so I ended up rewriting it like this, and I nested everything so I could run functions when the fetch was completed.
Right. So this code should look pretty comfortable. I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary here. The part that matters are down here where I run the dispatch. Okay, so this is what makes it an async action, is where I run the dispatch on the success callbacks. So now go to your index file in the utils and make sure we import that library. It's really just a module. HTTP async. Okay, and now we will use that module to make the async requests on our behalf. So we go back to our actions now. Okay, is everyone with me on the actions? All the way up on top on the imports, go ahead and import that new module we just imported. So far, so good. And then down here, you see where it says fetch users. Copy these 3 lines. Paste it right there like that. This is why I didn't remove them yesterday. These are async calls. Okay?
So replacing it with the returns. Yeah.
Right, so now here we do HTTP async. Okay? And then the HTTP async module gives us a get request right there, which takes a URL, query parameters, and the action type, the constant. So we follow that argument pattern.
When we need to change users received, is that going to be?
It's going to be
Is that a
get.
constant already, or?
No, we're going to leave it empty for now.
Okay.
So the URL. Well, who can tell me what the URL is?
It's gonna be user backslash current.
Almost slash auth slash current user.
Current user.
Exactly. Good. And then we don't need params. It takes no params, so we can just pass in null there. And for now, we're going to pass in null for the action type as well. We're not going to run a dispatch for now.
One more parenthesis. Right.
Thank you, David. You know what? Let's go ahead and run the entire cycle. So let's throw in a callback here. So constants, current user received. Because why not? I think we can all figure this out by now.
Oh, okay.
So by passing in an action type here, it will actually run the dispatch at the end of the callback, which is really what we want. We need that to happen. Okay, let me just word wrap this so we can see the whole thing. It's a little bit better. Now don't forget, these actions are supposed to go to reducers. So where do we need to go next on this? Right, actions and reducers work together. They basically are a team. All right, so where do we go next on this?
Reducer.
Which one? We have 3 reducers. Which one?
Account reducer.
Account reducer, right. So the account reducer, which is still empty right now, well, now it's ready to receive some data, right? So now we set up a case statement for the current user received action, which will run at the end of the async function. And as usual, I'm just going to do a console log. All right, don't worry about actually processing the data yet. Let's just make sure we're getting the console log to show up, thereby confirming we're getting the right data, and then we can do some logic with it. How are we doing so far? Okay, check in on Webpack because we just wrote a fair amount of code. We also wrote some new files, so I'm going to restart Webpack.
Do we have that constant for user receive?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good question. Probably because it might be
No, I
scaffolded,
think it's
but
commented
it might be
out.
commented out, so that would be a good thing to make sure about. So yeah, go ahead and uncomment that guy out and add that to our constants list, and that will resolve that problem.
So can you go back to the account user?
So we have the whole flow set up, right? We got the actions, we got the reducers, we set up the async function, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is now time to call that function, which is just another action. It's the current user action, right? This guy right here. Well, that part is the same as anything else. We hook it up to the dispatch to props, becomes a property, we call it, and then we see what happens, okay? So it doesn't really matter which container we pick. So I'm going to pick the search container, the map one, and I'm going to call the current user when the search container shows up, okay? And then we can just see who's logged in and who's not, all right? So before I get to that, is everyone?
Isn't the map in the search container, so the user's just going to be on the map? Why wouldn't you put it in the results container?
It doesn't matter because it all goes to the reducer anyway. And then we can just
okay.
register both containers.
Got it.
So pick one or the other, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
But are we good on this code?
Yeah.
Just
Oh, sorry.
Good, okay. So if we go to our search container, what we want to do is call the function as soon as it shows up so we can immediately retrieve the current user. So what we want to do is override a method called component did mount, which will be called when the component mounts, obviously. So here, we can just override the method component did mount. I'm just going to do a console log again. So first things first, let's make sure we're even getting that console log as soon as the map UI shows up. So we can confirm that right now. It's a pretty quick one.
What did you display in then?
Just a console log, that's it.
Oh, okay. It's to see if that function's getting called.
Yep.
So I think you.
Okay, so we have that showing up. Now right there is where we're going to make the call for our current user. Okay, so if we go back to component did mount, over here we're just back to hooking up an action in the dispatch. So who can take it from here? Who can tell me how to hook up that action?
On the... You have to do it in straight...
The dispatch to props.
Down here, what should I do?
We should add a method.
What do you want to call it?
Count.
Yeah,
Like
like
found. Something.
Yeah.
Account found.
Or just current user, right? Whatever we should somewhat reflect what we want it to do, right? So current user would be a good intuitive name here. And then how do we implement it?
Is it current user in there? It doesn't have a thing we have to pass?
Correct, because the API call requires no parameters.
Okay.
so
Just dispatch.
Dispatch, right?
Action.
Actions. the same action name, right? Current user. It doesn't require an argument, right?
And then, yeah.
And then that's it. Now we want to call this function on component did mount. So this is a property again, same thing. Now the async actions, this is important to recognize, returns a promise as well from where you call it. So you can continue the promise sequence here. You don't have to, but you can. And I find often that you should. So here, we can do this. We're going to ignore the error for now, and then console log. So async actions, the way we set them up, returns a promise as well. So we can complete the promise chain on the client side right here, just to make sure everything goes properly. And I don't know about you, but I got nothing, so let me debug. But
Unexpected.
Yeah, I got it.
you got it? Okay, good. Well, that means I probably just made a silly mistake somewhere.
Do you need a comma for these two on the returns? But yeah, you need a comma.
Yeah, you did.
Blah, blah,
Yeah, with
blah.
comma after a location change.
Yeah, otherwise it would just crash altogether.
Yeah.
So
That's
let's
cool.
see what I forgot here.
Yeah, HTTP async. Can I see your index and actions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And actions.
Oh, I forgot the dispatch. Yeah, I forgot the dispatch right here.
Oh, here, this method, this is, yeah.
Nope, did not forget that.
You need a backslash in front of the wall.
Yeah, current user received right there, that ID of the current user, right? The one that logged in.
Yeah.
You guys got it, but not me. What's going on here? Alright, so there it is over there, 61.
Wait, hold on, go back.
Go back to what? Oh, you got more
Yeah.
information.
So let's go here.
Success user ID. Oh yeah, it's stringified data. So data just has the user in it for some reason and not the
It
other
was
stuff.
a pop. Oh, socket tap.
So if I'm not getting all that data, my current user function is probably wrong, right? No, because it just has constants, current user received. So is that console log supposed to display more data than the user ID?
It should.
Okay. So it's just displaying ID for me. Does that mean my
Your current user endpoint on the routes file probably isn't making the fetch.
routes.
Okay. I'm gonna have to pause this video because I don't want to debug forever. So my mistake, to recap, was in my reducer, just a stupid typo. This is what I had earlier. I just misspelled stringify, hence it didn't run. So spell it correctly, and the original setup should now work. So just to recap, I'm going to reload the search component, the container, and make sure we're getting the current user properly rendering in the reducer. So if I reload this guy right here, I now see the current user. This is the most important part right here, where it says account reducer. That means the reducer is successfully receiving the current user. That's what matters the most, okay? And if you look at the JSON, you'll see that it's inside the user key. Right, so we want to parse that out, set that session, set the user in the reducer, and then that is now stored for the rest of the duration of the session. So if I, over here, I can set the user updated current user equals action.data.user. And that's it. Now the reducer is tracking the current user, which is available to the entire project. Are we good on that? Okay. And I'm going to do one quick thing to reflect that in the UI. So yesterday morning, Travis had a pretty good question about the nav bar, whether or not we should make the nav bar a container for the purposes of connecting to the reducer. Well, today I'm going to do that so we can start accessing this data. So this nav bar right here, we're going to make this a container instead so we can reflect the currently logged in user inside the nav bar where it really should be. So over here where it says settings, it should say like welcome LeBron James or welcome whoever, right? That'll tell you right away who's logged in. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to src components containers, create a nav container. This will be a pure container component. And for now, it will do nothing other than render the current nav container. It's just going to be a straight swap from one to the other. Okay, we're not going to build in any logic right now because I don't want to mess anything up at this stage. Okay. Does that make sense? So let's head over to our nav presentation component and just grab all that HTML and just stick it inside the container. And for now, this will be it. You just copy and paste it. That's all it is. Okay, which means we got to remove the nav component in the presentation layer. So go to the index and remove it.
Sorry, you go to the nav.json presentation, copying the whole thing.
Only the HTML, the JSX. Okay, and then remove it from the presentation directory.
Do we remove the file or just the references to it?
The file as well. We're just going to take it out
Okay.
and put in. We're moving it from point A to point B is essentially what we're
Yeah.
doing. So get it out of here. And then don't forget to export it in the containers. Just moving it from point A to point B, right? That's all we're doing.
So can you actually help me out again? So we do have nav.json presentation. We're going ahead and
But I removed it.
Wait, you put map instead of nav in there, I think. In index.js. Oh,
No.
my fault. I was looking at another file.
And then don't forget to update your imports in the containers themselves. Or not the containers, excuse me, the home.js.
Yeah.
The home.js. The nav is now a container.
Yeah.
And that should basically complete that transition.
In Home.js, we're importing it.
Yeah, you gotta change it from presentation to container in that list up top.
This is basically pertinent to Travis's question yesterday, should we make this a container? I'm going to go ahead and make that move right now. Obviously, I just did. It's a quick way to get the UI showing up on the nav bar for who's logged in. Okay, let's run the Webpack and make sure that doesn't crash. Run the dev server, just make sure everything is still kind of, in working order. Cool, everything is still in business. All right, so now that the nav component is a container, now let's hook it up to the reducer, same process as before, and use that reducer to render the current user. So I'm going to leave this to you. I'm just going to do it, and you guys try to do it on your own as well, because by now this process should start to feel somewhat familiar. Okay.
If we get an error content length mismatch,
I'm not really sure where that's coming from.
Wait, so where do we want to put that?
Where's
Right here. So you see how here it says welcome Katie Durant? That's the goal.
Okay.
Okay, because I'm currently logged in as Kevin Durant, so that's the goal.
Where it's in settings.
Right. Now, everyone watch this real quick just so you can see the goal here. So I'm going to go to the auth page one more time and sign up as a whole different user, right? Gordon Hayward, gmail.com. So now this time it's going to register me, log me in, bounce me to the map UI as Gordon Hayward, which means hopefully the nav bar will appropriately update. And there it is. Welcome Gordon Hayward. That's the goal. You see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so work on that right now. And when you get that done, break for lunch.
can I see the nav.js?
Sure.
So quick. When the page first loads, I think this props user current user is null.
Correct. So you need to add a conditional saying if it's null, don't render anything.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll be calling methods on null, right? You're probably getting a crash right there. So you want to set up a conditional saying if it's null, just leave it empty. Whenever things like that happen, by the way, I put little notes like this behind for myself. You see that? Can be null. You see that? Because that's what you just hit upon.
Mhm.
So little things like that are reminders for myself. When I come back to this code in like 3 months and I forget, you want to leave these little notes to yourself so that you remember, oh, that can be null. Watch out for that. Or whoever else is working on your project.
You know, bottom of this page.
Now, if you continue on to the December course, what we're going to do is populate this guy on the server side. Because if you think about what's happening, we're making a follow-up request to get the current user. But that request is going to the same server. It seems redundant because it is redundant. If you think about where this page is loading from, the index route, we may as well grab the current user when this page loads in the first place, and then populate the reducer so that the current user is in there right away. No need for a follow-up request. That's done through server-side rendering. Does that make sense? Obviously, we won't get to that today, but these are the more advanced concepts I would like to get into in a more long-form course. And that will save an additional request, which may not seem like a lot, but if you're operating at scale, let's say you get 5 million requests a day, well, you can cut that in half right off the bat, right? That saves a lot of request volume.
Sure.
What's that?
I was just saying sure.
Yeah, so that's why you want to make those minor optimizations. You don't want to be wasteful with your request volume.
So this file error I get is super expression must either be null or function, not undefined.
Null or what?
Super expression must either be null or a function, not undefined.
Did it mount on search.js?
Yep.
Oh wait, that this props current user. That was just so we can console log out, right?
Yeah, we can't remove it though. We have to fetch the current user right there.
Yeah, I was trying
Oh,
to
right.
use that in nav.
That's where it really should go.
Yeah,
That would be a better
but,
spot.
But this then promises that was just solely console out.
That's it. That's correct.
Console log out.
Yeah.
So could I use this.props.current user instead of this.props.account.current user for displaying the user in my nav file? That's originally what I was trying to do.
Yeah, we'll do that when we get back from launch. We're going to move this over to the nav container,
Okay.
which is really where it should go. But that'll be like a 2-minute thing. We're just moving some functions over.
But for some reason I couldn't, it said I didn't have access to current user. So maybe go to the bottom of the file. Is that current user function is coming from right there where it says current user dispatch actions current user, right?
Right.
So that's why I was trying to do this with a dispatch instead of a state to props when I was adding it to the nav.
That's what you should do, right? So this
Okay.
is in the dispatch. That's correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll when you get back from lunch, we'll throw that over to the nav container, and then
All
we'll move on.